Christmas came early for Alberta Premier Danielle Smith after awkwardly meeting with Prime Minister Carney in Calgary to sign a memorandum of understanding that sets the conditions for a new bitumen pipeline to the BC coast.
How was your flight?
Flight was very good.
Good.
Had a good sleep.
Oh, good. You've been so busy. I've been watching your schedule. I thought I had a busy one, but my goodness, you do. It's nice to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Shall I say a few words?
Do you want me to start?
Hello, EA. Yeah, I bought the Sims Canadian Politics edition, and the characters stopped moving for some reason. Just look at these two. You know, I can't tell if they're trying to hide how much they hate each other or how much they love each other. But this agreement is much more than just a pipeline. It outlines a complete reset with Alberta and the rest of Canada. But at what cost? So let's talk about the Prime Minister's pipeline promise ring and how it fits into the bigger picture. Hi, I'm Aaron Hagee McKay, and welcome to the Goose. This MOU has a bunch of stuff in it that broadly fits into three categories. One is the pipeline, which is tied to building the world's largest carbon capture project. Two is policy, erasing a bunch of Trudeau-era laws and going all in on industrial carbon pricing. Three is everything else: methane rules, AI data centers, nuclear power, and electrical interties. Honestly, it feels like the wedding registry of Sam Altman was marrying Charles Koch. Peppered throughout are mentions of Indigenous ownership and benefits, because it's kind of rude to take someone's pie without at least offering them a slice. Before getting into it, let me just say that according to the International Energy Agency, no new fossil fuel infrastructure can be built if we want to have at least a 50-50 shot of preventing the planet from potentially overheating past irreversible climate tipping points. It's all right here in this report entitled, "You Want a Livable Planet? Stop Building More the Fucking Problem." But of course, Donald Trump changes the math on international cooperation, and this MOU is super in reaction to Trump.
The U.S. has changed. That's their right. We must respond. That is our imperative.
This MOU is framed as a nation-building, sovereignty-maxing agreement that resets relations with Alberta after Premier Smith made separation easier, which, as we learned in a previous video, is entirely about joining the good old US of A, supported by the Trump administration. Yeah, handing over your home to a fascist government to own the libs. Haha. BC Premier and before picture in a cough syrup ad, David Eby, has been dead set against a new bitumen pipeline, saying it jeopardizes other projects in BC. Editing Aaron here, David Eby is maybe okay with the pipeline as long as the tanker ban stays in place. That's the update. He also pointed out that this isn't about energy security or sovereignty when we're selling oil to other countries.
I continue to be surprised that we're not having a conversation about selling our oil to Canadians, that we're not talking about adding refinery capacity. I think that's an important conversation that we could be having, and unfortunately we're not having.
Just last month, a refinery in BC that was owned by a Canadian company, Parkland, was sold to Texas-based Sunoco. Elbows up! So that's the context. So let's dive into what the MOU actually says about this theoretical pipeline. Three things off the top. There is no pipeline plan, the government is not building it or financing it, and there is currently no company proposing to build it. We're still very much in concepts of a plan territory. Think of this as a pipeline Pinterest board. Here's how the MOU describes the pipeline project. Construction of one or more private sector constructed and financed pipelines with Indigenous peoples' co-ownership and economic benefits, with at least 1 million barrels a day of low-emission Alberta bitumen, with a route that increases export access to Asian markets as a priority. Then weirdly, it goes on to say, it is agreed this new pipeline would be in addition to the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline for an additional 300 to 400,000 barrels per day destined for Asian markets. As far as I can tell, this clause exists entirely to be like, hey, remember how we spent 34 billion taxpayer dollars on the Trans Mountain expansion, Canada's only pipeline to Tidewater? Maybe be a little grateful considering there's a good chance we are never making that money back. Build me a pipeline. Well, you haven't filled the one we just bought you. If you want to learn more, we covered that in a previous video. Now, there are a number of reasons a pipeline to the North BC coast should never happen, outside of the whole, climate change thing. One, as mentioned, BC Premier David Eby says it jeopardizes other projects in the province. 2, several coastal First Nations have already come out against it. Goose, the president of the Haida Nation, was pretty clear, saying this project is not going to happen. 3, the tanker ban off the North BC coast is there for a reason. And while the MOU says that's flexible, it is literally the most dangerous coastal waters in Canada. It's like the maritime equivalent of American Ninja Warrior. So, you're just begging for an oil spill like Exxon Valdez further north. 80s reference! And lastly, it may just be a bad investment. Oil prices are currently lower than they used to be, and peak oil demand is forecast within the next 5 years, driven mostly by China investing heavily in green tech. The thing we should be doing. The other thing to consider here is our oil competition. Western Canadian Select oil is very similar to oil from Venezuela. So, if and when the US invades Venezuela and installs Chevron as their president, the price of our oil will likely tank, like the Exxon Valdez. 80s reference! But there are also reasons why it may happen. 1, a majority of Canadians, including BC residents, support building more pipelines because of Trump's shenanigans. 2, it lowers our dependence on the US as oil buyers and theoretically raises the price of our oil. 3, Bill C-5 gives the power to fast-track it, and the federal government doesn't actually need BC's consent. And finally, money. They want to grow the economy, attract investment, royalties, jobs, taxes, etc. But the MOU doesn't specify where the pipeline needs to be. Smith wants the North BC coast, but the path of least resistance is to just do it along the route of the Trans Mountain. For now, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is celebrating this as a victory. Remember during the election her so-called 9 bad laws? The ones she threatened with an unprecedented national unity crisis? Well, she got most of them.
This is a win for Alberta. First of all, one of the things I wanted was no export taxes or restrictions on Alberta oil and gas. Well, we got that. A complete redo of C-69. Well, not only are we going to get that through the Major Projects Office, but we have an agreement that intra-provincial projects are going to be approved by us. And there's going to be a rewrite of that bill. Emissions cap, gone. Carbon pricing stays provincial. We've got that. The clean electricity regulation scrap. We got that. Tanker ban carve out. We got that. The censorship of energy, we got that. That's 7 out of 9. That's not so bad.
Does this mean the national unity crisis is off?
48 hours later.
I support a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I know we might have a bit of a difference of opinion on that, but I hope people today feel a lot more confident that Canada works than they did a couple of days ago.
But in order to get this pipeline, we first need to build Pathways Plus, the largest carbon capture, utilization, and storage project in the world. A few years ago, the Pathways Alliance, the industry trade group of 6 oil sands companies representing 95% of production, made ads like this.
Really worried about climate change.
Yeah. We need to find every way possible
to reduce emissions from oil sands operations.
Like carbon capture and storage.
We have to work together.
Governments, industry,
and reduce emissions in a
big way.
Right?
Canadians believe we need to reduce emissions. We agree. That's why we're proposing to build one of the world's largest carbon capture and storage networks. See our plan at pathwaysalliance.ca.
But later, the Competition Bureau updated their rules to include greenwashing, and the Pathways Alliance immediately pulled all of their ads and nuked their website. That's the state of carbon capture and storage in Canada. It's a scam. But thanks to this MOU, lying about the environmental benefits of anything is legal again. It's like the purge for greenwashing. So, like and subscribe right now and I will personally plant 2 billion trees! Oil and gas is Canada's largest polluting sector. There are 2 ways to lower emissions. 1, produce less. 2, invest in better technology. This MOU chooses the secret third option. Invest in a fake solution that makes it look like you're solving the problem while harvesting tax money. At first glance, carbon capture and storage, or CCS, or CCUS, where the U stands for utilization, sounds like a great idea. Attach a giant Dyson to the side of a smokestack and pump that pollution underground. It's technically doable, but prohibitively expensive.
A message from the government of Alberta.
They're throwing your tax money at an old technology plagued with cost overruns and underperformance to get the fossil fuel industry an excuse to expand. DSmog did a good roundup of some of the choice failures, but let's just take two from Canada. The Boundary Dam in Saskatchewan was meant to be a world-leading clean coal facility that would sequester 1 million tons of CO2 a year. Saskatchewan Power threw $240 million taxpayer dollars to get 50% underperformance. Then there's the Quest CCS project by Shell in Alberta. It captured around 5 million tons of CO2 over a number of years, which sounds great until you realize it released 7.5 million tons over the same period, and it only took $745 million taxpayer dollars to do it. Pathways Plus is supposed to be massive, and the Prime Minister is all in on this objectively shitty technology with new tax credits in the federal budget because he wants decarbonized oil. But is that even possible? Well, let's assume Pathways Plus defies history and is able to actually sequester the 10 to 12 million tons of CO2 per year they say it will. Oil sands production currently spews out 88.8 million tons of CO2 per year. So even in the best case scenario, it will only reduce heat trapping pollution by 13.5%. Calling it decarbonized oil is a bit like giving kids a case of Bud Light and saying, "Don't worry, officer, it's non-alcoholic beer." If Pathways is built and more pipeline capacity is added, oil sands production will increase along with overall pollution. Carbon capture isn't about saving the planet, it's about saving the fossil fuel industry. What's worse is the fact that 90% of all CO2 from CCS is used for enhanced oil recovery, basically pumping CO2 into oil wells to get more of that sweet oil that would otherwise stay in the ground. And if you're wondering, wouldn't that make the climate worse? The answer is yes, very much so. There was pressure to not allow Pathways to use enhanced oil recovery because the woke mob thought that defeating the whole purpose of carbon capture would somehow defeat the whole purpose of carbon capture. But thankfully, Danielle Smith is a good negotiator.
Since we have used carbon capture technology before for enhanced oil recovery, that's another part of this announcement, is that CO2 will be able to be used for enhanced oil recovery, which should allow us to generate more revenue.
But even in the magical unicorn land of make-believe where CCS works perfectly, it does nothing for the oil you're actually putting into the pipeline. The Prime Minister is hoping this will create a $1 billion a year homegrown CCS industry that we can export around the world. And from the language they use, you can tell they have no intention of getting off of fossil fuels anytime soon.
The Pathways project, which will be the largest carbon capture project in the world, it'll mean that Alberta barrels of bitumen are amongst the lowest energy intensive in the world, therefore competitive not just for tomorrow, but for decades.
Smith, of course, was famously against carbon capture. But now that there's subsidies to build it, subsidies to run it, and all of which goes to subsidized oil extraction tied to a pipeline.
As you know, I was not a huge champion of carbon capture technology when I was in politics the first time. I wasn't. But I've seen with the passage of time, the investments being made and the fact that the technology works and we're getting better and better at it, and you can create a product out of it, including so that you can enhance oil recovery, I changed my mind.
Well, there it is. They're getting you to pay them to build an industrial strength greenwashing machine while looking like they're doing something good for the environment, all so they can increase oil production. CCS is very much like my friends in Australia say, state capture and storage.
Good evening. Alberta's premier isn't mincing words when it comes to the federal government's plan to cut oil and gas emissions. The premier calls it a cap on production and jobs that will lose Alberta billions. Shailen Skalski reports.
I'm pissed!
Before Mark Carney was elected, then Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault worked really hard to create a pollution cap for oil and gas, which the industry immediately branded as a production cap. The cap, which was never implemented, is now gone, like basically every Trudeau-era climate policy. Instead, PM "let's let the market decide if we go extinct" Carney is going all in on one policy: industrial carbon pricing, aka the shadow carbon tax.
Effectively a shadow carbon price, or price on pollution.
You're going to keep paying.
In some form of carbon tax.
Carbon tax Carney. He's just like Justin.
You sneaky.
Oh man, Pierre Poilievre must be so angry. He campaigned so hard against industrial carbon pricing. Now Danielle Smith is like, yeah, I love industrial carbon pricing. Carney sees this as his big climate win. The MOU sets the minimum effective price at $130 per ton of CO2. Currently, Alberta's effective price is around $30, so it's a substantial increase meant to incentivize emissions reductions. And CCS, at least in theory, is going to be the bulk of those reductions. Still to be decided is some kind of guarantee to keep the industrial carbon pricing mechanism stable for the long term, so the province can't just go and change it later. Contrary to what you might have heard, industrial carbon pricing does basically nothing to the cost of living. Most policy experts are pretty unanimous that industrial carbon pricing is the most effective, least costly option for lowering pollution, but only if it's done properly. However, historically market-based climate solutions have the potential to get gamed to the point where they're actually harmful, in some cases actually incentivizing more pollution. So how this is executed is going to be crucial. And finally, there's all the other in the MOU. Part of getting rid of the clean electricity standard was to build AI data centers, presumably to be powered by gas. This seems to be entirely for Kevin, Canada should join the US, O'Leary.
Where can I get 7 gigawatts of power? I found it in northern Alberta. The province is being run by a maverick woman, very friendly with the Trump administration because she's the top dog in getting the pipeline lit up again with Trump if he wants to do that. And she has provided a permit for me for thousands of acres, but 200 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. This is going to be the most low-cost energy in America. And look, it's a huge project. I got to raise $70 billion.
Who wants to build the world's largest data center in Alberta called Wonder Valley. It sounds less like a data center and more like the world's starchiest granola. Or like a knockoff of Westworld where the robots don't kill you, they just make you farm forever. There's also rules around methane leak reductions, which frankly should have been done ages ago. Also, nuclear power plants that will take forever to build and be super expensive, but hey, it's better than gas, I guess. And finally, and more boringly, electrical interties so Alberta can import and export electricity to neighboring provinces. Again, more gas turbines to power other provinces if TV's angry business boy and his horrifying AI slot factory doesn't suck it all up first. There are a lot of unknowns here. Just on the pipeline, who's going to build it? Where's the route? Will you need to lift the tanker ban? What does First Nation ownership actually look like here? What will BC do? Will the feds try to ram everything through with Bill C-5? And if they do, at what cost? And why are we even thinking about building a pipeline during a climate emergency? And then there's all of the stuff to even get to the pipeline, like how is the carbon pricing going to work? When will the carbon capture facility actually get built? Does PM Mark Carney know decarbonized oil is literally disinformation? Remember how the president of the Haida Nation said that this pipeline is not going to happen? Well, he also went on to say, this is an opportunity for the government of Canada and the Prime Minister to look in the mirror and see what kind of country he wants to lead, and what kind of country he wants Canada to be. And personally, I could not agree more. Canada's default identity is as a resource colony for empire, be it the French, the British, or the US. Doubling down on being a supplier of raw materials at the lowest end of the value chain while letting other countries lead us around is what got us into this mess. And I'm not convinced that this whole pipeline thing is good for sovereignty. Let's say we do get a new pipeline and oil sands production expands. That means our government is now more reliant on fossil fuel royalties. Giving the industry a greater share of the economy erodes sovereignty. Oil sands production is majority foreign-owned, with the US as the largest player. Expanding production here sends money to Trump allies no matter how you slice it. And they have no allegiance to us. They want to annex us because it is simpler than having to deal with our inconvenient rights and rule of law. And reducing our reliance on the oil industry is popular. 70% of Albertans think that the province is too reliant on the oil and gas industry. This MOU makes that worse. 65% of Canadians want to invest in renewable energy instead of fossil fuel developments. If anything, this MOU shows you just how much of a stranglehold this industry has over our government. Now, the cool thing about renewable energy and stored technologies is that it sidesteps the whole dependence on the flow of fuels pumped in from elsewhere and lets communities power themselves locally. And yes, that means some resource development for critical minerals. So why are we selling those to other countries instead of trying to make those technologies work here at home? What is our role in the future? Now, I think we have two paths: a colonial culture based on domination and exploitation, where our relationship to the land and people is one of plunder, or a democratic culture that decentralizes power, respects rights, and allows for self-determination within a shared framework. So, which path do you want to take? Thanks for watching. Big shout out to the flock over on Patreon. See these names? That could be you. Link in the description. And if you want to support the Goose for free, you can like, subscribe, share, and I'm told there's now a hype button that I don't fully understand, but I'm sure it feels mighty good to press. Let me know. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.